the live stream, the meeting. Yes, we are here in this place. Okay, let me just be in live stream. Okay. Yes. Let me see. Check my systems here. Remember, if you hear any background noise on my end, please let me know. Because that's gonna mean I'm gonna have to transition to my headphones.
Mhm.
Because I want to minimize any noise.
Yeah, we live. We live.
Okay. Live.
Live.
All right, we live. As I always say, there we go. Yep. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Mr. Cage, and we have to my left, right.
Yeah, we in here. What's up, everybody?
Mr. Krim, my dear brother. And this evening, this has been a long time coming. We've been waiting for a little while to do a collaboration, and we chose this topic, and we was discussing it before we started. Bridging Summer Gaps, a guide for parents to strengthen their child's academic resilience and positive behavior during the summer break. Personally, as we was discussing, Mr. Krim and myself, I don't think that us as a community and parents, generally speaking, understand how important this topic is. Our kids lose a lot. And because of Mr. Krim and I being in education, we get opportunity to survey students a lot, survey parents, ask the questions just from a learning standpoint. And we've been surveying students specifically. And the question has been, do you do anything academically during the summer? And the resounding sound has been no. And that to us is an issue. Krim, you jump
Yeah.
in and share, sir.
No, I think the initial problem we're talking about right now is the fact that there's this misconception or perception that school is the first and last place where learning is supposed to take place for our kids. And I think that's why, and there are a variety of other issues tied into why this learning loss happens.
Yeah.
But I think that if we are thinking from the standpoint that our children are not going to learn things beneficial until they walk through that school door in preschool, kindergarten, elementary school, then of course when that day ends at the end of May or mid-June, then from that standpoint we're helpless because then what do we do unless our kids are in summer school for learning loss or unless we enroll them in something. And I think it's important too from that, like, let's even lay out what the issue is overall. So, when we're talking about learning loss, there are some studies, and there's a lot of nuance in this, but there are some studies that say that Black children over the summer. Now, of course, this can depend on income level. So, our folks who are in the lower income bracket are more susceptible to this. But math, you can lose upwards of almost 3 months of learning over the summer,
Mhm.
right? For reading, we have upwards of about 2 months over the summer. So that means like our kids, and think about for the adults watching this, let's really think about and consider what we were doing as children over the summer.
Yeah.
There could be a lot of time sitting around, there could be a lot of time watching TV. And I think what's more of an issue now though is now we be learning, but we probably wouldn't be learning academically. We'd be outside, running up and down the street, right? We learn in a different way. We socializing and stuff like that. But now
Hmm.
these kids who for me, ain't going outside of socializing as much as we used to because of these devices. They're more susceptible to their loss because if you're sitting in front of a tablet all day or a computer all day
Hmm.
or television all day, then what does that 2 months of learning loss actually look like? And that's under the assumption and perception that when these kids were even in school during the school year, that they were learning to the degree that they're capable of, right? Because from
Man,
that standpoint, because for me, all kids are capable learners, but we teaching all kids the same way, bruh. The same way. So if that kid has an A, that learning loss looks different from a child who just got by.
can I share this with you?
Yeah.
I got one thought to share, based on what you share, but I want to share this before I share the thought. And this is no slight towards our kids because they're our kids because we're a community or our parents. But you used to play basketball, right, Krim? When you come into the gym, and I'm speaking from a male standpoint, if a person come into the gym with Air Force Ones on, do you think that they're a hooper?
They ain't serious. They ain't serious.
Hmm. And we both been in education. You've been in education for how many years, you would say?
I taught in the school system for 12 years, but I will include my time as an independent educator as well. So this would be my 15th year.
So 15, and then I've been mentoring, teaching academically and teaching from a vocational standpoint all together 16 years. So let's just round it up to 30 years combined experience between you and myself.
Mhm.
So we've been in middle schools and high schools, and what I've seen specifically in terms of the middle schools, I'm sorry, the high schools, is people have on book bags, but that doesn't make them a student. Just because you have on a book bag and you walking into this building, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a student. And I say that because us as parents, we don't really know what takes place in the classroom on a daily basis. And with you giving the data points and the statistics as far as the learning loss, my mind as a father is thinking that my child, male or female, is learning, working hard, being diligent, is that may not be the case. Then when we transition over into the summer months, the 2 months, and those 2 months go like that. You said two or two and a half. Those 2 months, 2.5 months go very, very fast. So my assumption is that my son and daughter has learned what they needed to learn to advance to the next grade. But that's an assumption because I'm not there. I'm looking at the grades, and the grades are reflecting what I think means or translates into they understand the content, they on their path to post-secondary education, whatever it may be. But sometimes that may not be the case. And I want to end this little rant that I'm going through with the statement is that school ends, education does not.
Mm.
Too many of our kids think that they understand that school ends at whatever the time or district 230, 240, 250, 315. But education never ends. So us as educators, us as parents and community leaders and advocates, we really my professional perspective is that we really need to emphasize that your education doesn't end because you're not in the building. It's comprised of everything that you are, every interaction that you have, every book that you read, every math problem that you do. This is all encompasses your education.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the mindset shift a lot of us need in terms of, understanding the first thing that we actually should be doing. It's our kids, by the time they start going to a elementary school, have already, by the time you five, like those first 5 years are pivotal. Your brain is more malleable. You're able to learn things easier because of the rapid growth you have. This is
Mhm.
proven. So like, they always say if you want your kids to learn a language, you should start at a young age,
Right.
especially like you wanted that child to learn Spanish or whatever. If you put them in a daycare that's bilingual, by the time they five, it's second nature. So by the time they start first grade, we thinking, okay, that's where the real learning start. No, they already have become a majority of who they're gonna be as a person. And that has been based on, them being around you. And I'm talking about the parent, right? Them being around you, anybody that's socializing them. So this is gonna be the parents, the immediate family. This is going to be the media. This is going to
Hmm.
be whatever daycare they're going to. If they outside all day, the friends in the neighborhood. But because many of us, of course, are going to have them closer to us during those primary years, we have the biggest impact on that. And I can say this, for example, by just thinking about, so I got four kids, four girls, and they all wide range. I got, youngest two, as old as 11, right? One thing I've noticed with all my kids is they pick up my habit of reading. Now, it's not to say, because when when they're younger, it's like they still prefer, what I'm saying, to watch a little TV. But if I tell them we reading, there's not as much resistance. Because for
Hmm.
me, even though it was enforced for me, like I still didn't really like doing this. I was in college. But it's
Yeah.
to the point that when we go into bed, my youngest daughters, the expectation is, Daddy, you reading. Daddy, we reading. So by the time they even start going over sight words and literacy when they was in school, it's not that I taught them everything about it, but I laid the foundation. So my
Hmm.
2 year old, so my 5 year old, she's learning these words and stuff now in school. My
Got you.
2 year old, they ain't doing that yet. But what does she do? She grabs the book and she's doing this. Dabba 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 dabba. Dabba 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 dabba.
Right, right,
There's
right.
a, like she just making up words, like, or she just saying a bunch of random words that she knows, so it
Wow.
appears like she's reading. So that habit is there. So then when she begins to learn how to read, preschool, kindergarten, there's
Uh-huh.
excitement. Then you get to first grade, most of what her reader scores will be based on is the fact that we are in a household where the environment is based and entrenched in literacy. I'm reading
Hmm.
words, I'm reading words that I know they don't know on purpose. Like my kids' book, bro, the ABCs of Affirming Black Children, I purposely
Hmm.
put a whole bunch of big words in that book.
Yeah.
Because some
Yeah.
of the words,
Oh,
some of the words I didn't know till I wrote the book, right? But it's intentional because I always tell folks like our kids, they're going to achieve to the level of expectation we have for them, right? That's a key point too.
can you say that again, please?
Our kids will rise to the level of expectation that we set for them.
So pause. If I bring the bar down to them, they don't have to come up. But if I
Exactly.
raise the bar, they have to come up.
It's like, bro, going back to hooping, because we know that language right there. If
Hmm.
you are a hooper, young player, it don't help you at all to lower the rim when you playing. You know what I'm saying? Like it feels
Whoa.
good. It feels good. I used to do it so we could really dunk and stuff. But like eventually you're gonna be grown. And you've been lowering the rim to 8 feet, 9 feet, so you could do dunks. But
Yeah.
that means you were never able to build your strength up to play on that 10-foot goal at that level. You know,
Hmm.
so there's a way where you can expose your kids to this large, level of literacy, but then you also got to be practical to where they are. I'm gonna tell my kids a big word, and I'm gonna say, say it. But then it's like, okay, but now we still gonna read some of these books at your level. I'm gonna read some of the complex books I'm reading out loud, knowing you ain't getting it. Then I'm gonna read.
Hmm.
We don't dumb it down for our kids. This ain't commercial music. we,
Man.
we say smarten up. You know what I'm saying? So by the time they get there, then they're ready. And I want to also give parents this to consider.
Hmm.
So if our kids or low income kids are having, like, let's say just roughly 2 months of a learning loss over the summer, think about it in terms of what does it look like for you if you work out frequently 3 4 times a week, then you take 2 months off. What that look like? You go back to the gym like, man, I don't know if I can. Well, I can't put that weight up. Or if you run every day, bro, or 5 days a week, and you take 2 months off. That's the
Yeah.
same way our brain works. That's the
Yeah.
same way excuse me, the habits work for school. So
Yeah.
if you get 2 months of learning loss, if we just start with first grade and then we go about to their senior year, that is, bro, what's two times? That's 24 months.
Hmm.
24 months, right? Like, so that's 2 years. And we're already starting in a deficit a lot of times with this learning gap, depending on the school and the environment we in.
Yeah.
That's a compound effect right there.
Powerful. What I was going to say too, as I was listening to you talk, I jotted down to myself that we are a product of our environment. whether we look at it positively or negatively. And I know most people, when you hear the words positively or negatively, we think good or bad. And I, this is not what we're saying. When we say positive, we're talking about a behavior pattern that's adding momentum to your long-term goal. When we say negative, we're talking about a behavior pattern that's taking away or detracting you off your long-term goal. So we are a product of our environment. I've seen it countless numbers of times in different spheres of life that when a person is in an environment, if they're in an environment long enough, and you pointed it out as far as with your baby girls, they succumb to that environment because it's just a law, it's a principle. How much more as parents should we take the lead in making sure that our children are educated? Because it's my firm belief that we've become entirely too reliant on the education system. You and I talked about this earlier, where it's okay, when I become in my mindset, if I have a behavior pattern that's reliant, then I'm looking at them and I'm saying, well, why not? Why are you not teaching my child this, and this, and this? And when the summer comes, we stay in that behavior pattern and our kids end up suffering. The aspect of suffering is not in the immediacy of the suffering. We see the effect long term when they leave in the high school environment and we find out that they don't have the skills that we thought that they had or that we assumed. I want to read regression real quick, this quick definition. So regression in the context of education refers to the loss of academic skills and knowledge that often occurs over extended breaks, because you alluded to the exercise an example,
Mhm.
such as a summer vacation. Check it out. If you're watching this on whatever platform, please jot this down. There are no breaks when it comes to education, but there are breaks when it comes to school. There are no breaks when it comes to education,
Yeah.
but there are breaks when it comes to school. We're trying to set up precedents to break the mold and say education is beyond the four walls of the institution. Research indicates that students, especially those, as you alluded to, from disadvantaged backgrounds, tend to experience substantial regression in crucial subjects, as you said, like math and reading over the summer months. You got it, brother. What's your thoughts? Because I know you said you gave some numbers associated with that, but based on me kind of going back and
Yeah.
rehearsing it, forgive me if I did say the
No,
same thing. But if you want to elaborate on it, feel free.
I want to go back through some of those numbers there, what you're talking about, the regression. So, we again, the assumption is in America, especially within our community, we look at this stuff again, standardized tests, and we thinking that everybody's starting from an equal playing foot, level field.
Hmm.
We already know, depending on your income level, usually you will have more of an advantage in this country because of your access to education, resources. It shouldn't be that way because, like, public schools should theoretically all be funded the same, but depending on
Hmm.
your zip code, your public school is getting more money, more resources. So even when we start in first grade, all of our kids aren't starting that level. Then we got to think about historically our ancestors were forced to build this nation without any income, like, and not just like working in the factory, like we were under, we were enslaved. So this is a whole nother thing. So we ain't, it was illegal for us to learn how to read and write. We
Hmm.
had to start out separate schools, in many cases our own schools, and learn at night and risk our lives. That legacy still exists within us because we weren't, for besides the fact we weren't given reparations, we weren't given educational reparations. We don't even have our education paid for. We're still fighting for equitable funding in our community. So statistics show that even by the time we're in fourth grade, it's not a slow regression. We're saying that Black students in our state, at least of Illinois, and this is similar cases all across the country,
Hmm.
um, only 18% of us are doing math at grade level by fourth grade.
Hmm.
That's barely 1 out of 5, right? Reading, same, 18% by fourth grade. And of course, they usually after fourth grade, especially for our boys, that's when they begin to pull back their interest in school because as you get older, you're expected to sit down longer. You don't get that recess. You way past even having a nap time. You get reprimanded
Yeah.
for doing, you know what I'm saying? You get reprimanded for doing things that kids normally and naturally do, right? Now we talking about eighth grade, bro. That
Mm,
18% of us reading doing math at grade level in Illinois drops to 9%. 9%. For reading, it's about 16%. Now let's
mm,
flip that. Okay. That means that by eighth grade, 91% of our students in Illinois, at least, are not doing math at grade level, bro.
mm.
9 out of every 10 black students for reading,
It's crucial.
84% are not. Like that is mind blowing, bro. And again, just kind of like because really now we building this context of just why this is so important. That is
Yeah.
mind blowing. And again, for our parents, it's a systemic effort to make it this way. This isn't like, we oftentimes we come into these situations not realizing the issue, and then we see the issue and we start to, maybe we loathe, maybe we blame ourselves and things like that. We got to understand this was put in place. This was supposed to be this way. So like grapple with that. This was supposed to be this way.
Mm,
Now that we know the information, we are pressed and hard, like we are responsible to say, what can we do to change this? And I do want to also mention, because we know the type of educators we are, right?
mm-hmm.
The test score doesn't tell the whole story. Let's be clear. It's a
Right, right, right.
we talked about this, right? We got a whole they'll see that later, but like it's
Yeah,
a generalized way to determine your students or your child's intelligence. However, it can also be a pathway to more opportunities. I
yeah,
think that's important to say.
yeah. I forgot what statement that I shared with you earlier around that. I'm gonna look it up to see.
Oh no,
Oh,
we yeah, go ahead.
can I say
Go ahead.
it? Make a mental note, you all. Oh man, the school system is not broken; it is fixed. I give you this brief story. I worked at Job Corps, well, Joliet Job Corps for 5 years of my career as a employability and career development instructor, working with students, creating healthy relations programs, mentoring programs, and training staff. One day was having lunch, and one of my fellow staff came into the cafeteria upset, and she said, "Mr. Cage, Mr. Cage," she just, you know, expressing how she felt at the time. I'm listening to her, and she said, "This program ain't really helping these kids. This, that, and the third, this, that, and the third." And I looked at her and I said, "It is helping them." She said, "What you mean?" Because the program is created this way for this outcome. The outcome that you want, you need your own school. So the
Mm,
outcome that you're looking for, you need your own school. So we can't say, we always got to look at the design and who designed it and what outcome did those individuals design it for. That's why the thought is the school system is not broken. It is fixed because if we put our feet in the people's shoes or the group who created it, is producing is producing the outcome
yes,
that
indeed.
the creators designed it to be. So what that does is that, so I'm making that thought, and it could be controversial, but as Krim and I was discussing today, and I give you this other thought because we're on the roll, we seek so much approval on social media, but in general, that when somebody disagrees with us, we often take offense and miss the lesson, and we miss the value in the lesson. Well, even that statement coming like that, some people may see it like, this person don't know what they're talking about. But if you don't agree with it, listen and ask questions and maybe that lesson that's necessary will get internalized. Then our mindset change, and then we take a different approach when we're educating our kids. And that was one point that I would pass the mic to you on by saying this. Our students, like so if Krim and I are in a classroom setting, traditional classroom, or if we out and about in these different communities or these different states, educating youth specifically, the youth are our students. They're not our children. And so what that means is that it's a different approach when you understand that this is somebody else's child. It's not your child. To me, as us, we would take tremendous care of someone else's child because we understand that that child is not ours. We know that child is our student, and that will bring a different approach to educating that person. And for me, and I know you feel the same way because we brothers, is that I go harder when I know that child is connected to me through a family that I grew up with.
Mhm.
That's just what it is. That expectation is higher because I'm thinking about your uncle or your auntie. I went to high school with them. I went to middle school with them. I know the type of environment that we came from. So when I see you, I'm gonna expect more because your family is entrusting me to make sure that I do the best in my professional ability, but make sure that you save at the same time.
Yes, indeed. That's real, and it makes me think too in terms of the system being the way it's supposed to be. Like I think we all understand really like it's to prepare you to get a job, not a well-paying job. And it also depends on the track you in because you can go to a school that's diverse, but then they can have separate tracks that segregate the kids.
Hmm.
Kids who are expected to maybe achieve higher academically, and oftentimes again we talk in income status and stuff like that. So by the time you leave, like especially depending on the community, it could be to funnel you to a particular college. It could be
Hmm.
to funnel you to a particular job. Maybe it's like a warehouse job, or it could be to funnel you to the local jail. It's like those three choices, right? It's the college, it's the local job, or it's the local jail. Well, now in the midst of those three, we don't see entrepreneurship, but somebody leaving here doing it. and that's the thing we don't often talk about because these kids graduate, they don't even learn how to just simply how to create an LLC, for example, or how they can employ their community. Because for me, it's like, yeah, we do want our kids to leave and be employable to a certain degree. Because I don't believe like if you're not employable, then you probably can't operate a business well too. But at the same time, this kind of for me gets to when we start talking about some of the practical solutions. My first thing for people to consider is we got to be very clear on the purpose of school, like you said, but then we got to be able to flip it for us because we know like what they meant for something, we can mean for something else, right? Because while you on the job doing something you might not like, you're still picking up intangible skills that you can transfer. You know what I'm saying? Because if I didn't teach, bro, for 12 years, ain't no way I could do any of this. Ain't no, I couldn't just become a content creator out of high school. This ain't the
Yeah.
NBA draft. I couldn't just get fresh out, start making my own TikTok. So we gotta be clear. Okay, the school wants to use my kid for this, but this is what I'm gonna use school for. And I'm gonna I had this from a presentation too. And I think it's important to implement this.
Yes,
This
sir.
how I this how I break it down, brother.
Uh-oh.
We got our kids. All right. If you take in English, right? So first, we know the purpose, right? And I think the purpose has to be something for the collective.
Yeah.
Like whether your child wants to be a teacher, a preacher, an athlete, an entertainer, a doctor, a lawyer, entrepreneur, landscaper, they want to own a local restaurant, all of that still has to tie in. But what about us, right? How does this help us out? You gonna get a local business? Who you trying to employ? You want to be a teacher? Who you gonna teach? You want to be a doctor? Who's your patient? All of this has to, all of that has to come back to the center. You know how you when you was growing up, you be outside all day, but you coming back home in that street, like, come on. So we resetting
Yeah.
that. Okay, so now that we got the purpose clear, it should be collectivism from my perspective.
Got
Then
you.
we know that when our kids taking English, that's going to fine tune their communication skills. You
Yes, sir.
can't like To me, I don't care how much AI we get in this world. If our kids cannot effectively communicate, they don't have to be public speakers, but they have to be able to communicate verbally. You got to be able
Yeah.
to address things. You got to be able to go to somebody and clearly state your perspective. You ain't so let's check it out. I know because our kids, and I'm talking about all kids. I ain't talking about this all kids. They
Yeah.
ain't want they ain't trying to read or write for the most part. But I promise you that thesis statement gonna pay off because most of my videos I'm starting with a thesis statement because the thesis is the main idea. So I got to put the main idea on that label so people want to keep viewing. I got to put that main idea in my. I write every day, brother. I write
Yes,
every
sir.
day. You see what I'm saying? So we got
Yep.
to be clear that communicate. And then when you communicate with somebody, right? You try the job interview skills; those transfer.
They
I'm
do.
interviewing every day. I get on a call with a school district that might want to bring me in. I'm interviewing on the spot, brother. Or somebody want me to make content, I'm interviewing. Somebody want to
Yep.
follow my page, I'm interviewing based on that video. So we got to be able to
And
communicate verbally. We got to be able to write well because that's going to help us get our point across. And if you're trying to agitate for change, or if you're trying to help somebody out, you got to be able to say, this is what should be done and do it concisely too.
wow. I
Bro, come on, we keep going. I'm gonna get through this like social science, right? What I taught history,
got you.
critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
memorizing. It's why did this happen? What's the cause and effect relationship? How does that impact where we are now, and how can I use it moving forward? You see what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying?
Yeah.
Science, identify the environmental issues. Experiment. Our kids are scientists until they get to school and they told to sit down and shut up. Or maybe it's us, the parents, telling them that
Okay.
in science. They're scientists, bro. They grabbing stuff around the house, they throwing it, they turning on water. They want to see what happens, right? PE and health, self-explanatory. We need to be moving constantly, right? We need to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, bro, I remember the biggest mindset shift for me when I moved from the South Side was when I started living in the suburbs. It was like, and even in Chicago, it depends on your neighborhood. But my neighborhood in Chicago, I never saw people jogging. Never. You were like if you was running from something or to something.
Right, 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 right.
You running for safety, bro.
Yeah.
It's every time I see it now, it still be crazy to me because it's like you're so privileged. You can just run for fun. That's a privilege.
Wow.
But like when you in health class, it conditions you to say because you especially in high school, you're doing that every single day. That should condition you to say, I need to move every day of my life,
Mm.
lifting, walking, running, whatever it is. And then you're thinking about, well, I'm running, I'm walking, but why don't I maybe my neighborhood have access to a track? Or why don't I have access to fresh food? So again, now we combine the science and health, art, self-expression. We can't survive with the sane mind if we don't have a positive outlet. We don't have to be Picasso. We don't have to be Basquiat. We just got to be have a way to express ourselves. For me and you, a lot of that expression is this could be our art. Teaching is an art to me. It could be a
Mm-hmm.
variety of different things, but that's self-expression. And then you can even use it to expose things. Your art class in school, they probably ain't thinking of that, but you can use it that way. And then, of course, I got to end this with math because math is the most hated. And my wife
Mm-hmm.
is a teacher, so I hear this, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing about math is I think you'll either have kids who really, really love it because some do them and who really, really hate it because they don't understand it. But I began to realize that the beauty of math is that you don't necessarily know. I think it has greater meaning with you not knowing why you need it now. And you may
Mm-hmm.
not ever use some of those formulas, but it's problem solving
Yeah.
at its core. It's built breast building on principles, unlike anything. If you weren't paying attention in third grade, it's gonna be hard in eighth grade. Whereas if I did bad in history class in third grade, I could be good in my junior year. So
Mm-hmm.
if you can't buckle down and solve those math problems, I'm telling you, kid, like that math problem is the problem in your life. It's a problem in your neighborhood. Are you gonna be able to be patient enough, sit through that,
Mm-hmm.
go through the formula, the process, and get through it? So they got a purpose, but we got to be able to flip that purpose for ourselves too.
We rolling, man. I'm gonna share a couple of thoughts and then kind of talk about what we doing because we we're in the zone. We're golden right now. We golden right now. I like the parallels that you brought as I heard you talk. I was thinking about just the transferable skills, which brought me back to when I used to teach English, and you got the CER, you got the claim, you got the evidence, and the reasoning. We do that so much as a society naturally that I'm sure that our kids don't understand how important that skill is in your nonverbal communication when you're typing or writing, and also in your verbal communication. But two other statements that I wanted to share real quick was because I hear, and I don't think I ever heard you refer to this, but I've heard some of the greats like the Dr. Umars and different individuals talk about the prison to school pipeline. And what I would say to us is this. So this is another note for y'all to consider, that the prison to school pipeline is not only to the literal form of incarceration, but it's in a mental form of incarceration. So when we talk about understanding that the system is fixed itself, fixed means there's a restriction, limitation on the quality of life that our kids would experience. The prison, the school to prison pipeline is not only to a literal prison, but it's to a mental prison. A physical prison does not manifest unless the person is already entrapped in their mind, which leads me to this last thought, is understanding the rules of engagement. If you don't understand, if our kids don't understand the rules of engagement, they won't know how to play the game. So each industry that they desire to go into has some type of rules of engagement. Even the system of school that they find themselves in has rules of engagement. We got to teach them the rules of engagement so they can use the system to their advantage. So whatever their long-term goal may be, they need to understand, how does the system work and how can I use the system to advance my life so I can experience a awesome or high quality of life. So I'll read this real quick. So we're already given the insights concerning the combating the learning loss. We're giving the skills and helping our parents what our kids develop and internalize so they can adopt a strategy to promote the effective learning habits, keyword, enhance academic performance, and encourage these positive behavior patterns during the break. So I want to say this, that this whole conversation, this event itself, is directly connected to our program, Potential, teaching kids to think before they do. It affords us the opportunity to go to different schools who may be financially challenged, or families, single parent family homes. A lot of times, of course, that's moms. It allows us to be able to provide these services, these mentoring services, these educational services to these schools and families to take the burden. I hate to see people carrying weight that they don't have to. Our responsibility as men, as educators and community leaders and advocates, is to find ways to share the load, because it really does take a village. So please note that 100% of the proceeds from this event is going to be to provide the mentor services to low income schools and families. So we encourage all who are watching to tap into the GoFundMe link and feel free to contribute what you wish. Even though you may see, different numbers themselves as far as what to donate, you can donate whatever you wish. You can bypass that. So that's the cheat code for this evening, dear brother. What's
Yeah,
any
no,
thoughts you got?
I think it's important, man, to reiterate too, like, especially considering that a lot of schools already were struggling financially with grants and things like that. It's more difficult for them to access it in the schools, and the kids that we aspire to work with the most are usually within the low income parameters, Title I schools. So they might want to bring us in, because what we're doing is, now we're talking about this for more for parents right here, but we're instilling these principles into our kids too, so that they know how to be proactive and do these things too, but also to understand the program that's in place is to give your kids all this information, but not truly speak to who they are as people. And one of the first questions we do with kids when we go in there, bro, is we talking about, what is your purpose? We talking about, what is your dream?
Yes, sir.
We're talking about connecting that to something higher than just something individualistic, about making money or something. It's about like, how does this all tie in together? So for
Indeed,
anybody that,
indeed.
yeah, for anybody that's donating, bro, it's like this allows us to go through that barrier of schools not having the income or the access, I should say. Um, yeah, man, I think that's important to say. I think that's important.
Because one of the first pieces, and this is revelation. This is outside the traditional norm of schooling itself. What area of the country are we in? We are in Illinois, Joliet, which is about 40 to 45 minutes outside the city of Chicago. There, thank you, sir. One of the first, and this is going to help us because I had a parent ask me a question concerning, I think it was concerning her son or nephew at the college and career fair. And the question that she asked me, I answered it. And then her response was, well, her response wasn't this verbatim, but this is what I got from her response. Well, I'm doing that already. So I'm on the right track. Yeah, but it takes more. It's in, to tap into the village, we got to hear from the elders. We all have experiences and tools to offer. But if I'm asking, Mr. Krim a question about, raising four girls or how to navigate that terrain, I need to listen and get the impartation from his experience because if I'm asking the question, then it's not showing up in my life. But what I wanted to say, as far as from a career standpoint, this is another note that we can make. Parents, it is important to help your child, preteen or teen, to discover their gift. I didn't say find. I said discover. How does that take place? We got to get them in different environments. So I always say exposure. We explore. We experiment. We got to get them in different environments. Once that child discovers their gift, guarantee you this, that that's going to be directly connected to their interests and passion, and they're more susceptible to follow that long term in a school environment because if you ask your child, many of them, and just allow them to share how they feel without us, doing the parent thing that we do, they will let you know that school is boring to them. I need something else that's going to light the fire of passion inside of me so I can be motivated to go here. But if I discover my gift and I can see the long-term dream or vision, it's going to motivate me to be here even when I don't want to be here. And then the last aspect that I would add to our educators is one of the best practices is that it is extremely important to find out why your students are in this classroom. We will be amazed if we ask them that question and listen to their responses. Many of them are going to say, because my parents forced me to be here, or because it's the only class that I could take, or I need this to graduate. Those reasons aren't good because those reasons don't hold value to those people. But if it doesn't, let's say that a child is in a class that they don't necessarily want to be in, then we need to highlight, as you elegantly highlighted, the soft skills, the transferable skills. These are the skills that you need to make that dream that you told me about become a reality. But these practices for parents should not stop when school stops. They should be ongoing in these 2 months where our kids will be off for the summer.
Yeah, man, you made me think, reflecting as you were talking, because I'm thinking like, okay, when I was a child through high school or whatever, like, man, what was, I knew what I was interested in, but because I think what we want to do too is help our parents make the marriage between what your kids really love doing outside of school and how that applies to what they're doing in school now. Because it can
Hmm.
seem very difficult. All our kids really like doing something, right? If you kind of watch them around the house, if you kind of see what they do with their friends, it'd be video games, sports, whatever, like you just kind of pay attention. And I was just thinking, like, man, when I was growing up, I really, really loved basketball, of course. But one of the things about basketball that I did outside of just love playing, I didn't just watch it. I used to love, now this is old school. They used to have, and I don't know if it's still around, because I don't really be on cable like that, but like it was ESPN,
Yeah.
I think. I don't know if you remember that network. It was ESPN Classic, and they would show old like sports clips. So growing up in the 90s, they might show stuff from the 80s and the 70s. So I'm all into it. I'm watching these old, it felt like I grew up watching Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. I knew all of them for I knew Bill Russell, John Havlicek, Bob Cousy. Bro, I was a basketball historian before I was a historian. So now I'm thinking about it like and it connects. I
Hmm.
always did good in history class, but I was just like, it is what it is. Now, what do I do as an adult? I love studying the past to help folks moving forward and to help myself get purpose, all of that. So there's a connection there, kind of again going back to this statement of, of giving our kids purpose and initiative. We have to really think about and reflect on that and kind of even giving more solutions. I would say that once we have established, we got to be clear that all of our kids have some type of purpose that is based on what they can do for all of us, right? And then that can also take it deeper if you you know what I'm saying, have a spiritual, practice or whatever, right? But then
Hmm.
once we even do that, let's say we're doing the summer, then what are we doing? I want you to, chime in on this too, but what are
Okay.
we expecting our kids to do on a regular basis? I would say one of the first things is like I look at that tandem of reading and writing. Those are the main things. Now we know they're gonna play, you know what I'm saying? That shouldn't be a difficult thing for our kids to do to go outside and explore and play or take them to a park or something. But we have to also give them structured time to do some reading and to do some writing. And what that looks like for me is I think 5 years ago, a lot of us were forced to become, for those of us who are parents, you were forced to become like what is it called? Now I'm drawing a blank. Homeschool teacher. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
that period of time, everybody was teaching at home. You ain't even like we was all through. We working at home, we teaching and all that type of stuff. But one of the things we all realized was, man, those kids be in school probably more than they need to be. Really, they in school 7. You don't even like. It don't, bro, ain't no 7 hours of work. Now some of these
Hmm.
teachers were overdoing it to get. You know what I'm saying? But if you give your kid an hour to two for reading and writing. It don't have to all be straight through because our kids need to move a little bit, probably every 15. And that's a crazy thing too. When you start to understand that school is actually anti-intellectual, it is not in accordance with what we know works best for kids. Kids should be starting school later, not 7, 8 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? Kids should be moving every 15 minutes, not sitting down 40 minutes straight. So you have your kids sit down, read a little bit, get up, move around, write and reflect. We were talking about this later earlier about how the three main things you want to focus on with your kids with reading and writing skills is can they identify the context of what they're reading? So what is it
Right, right,
about?
right.
They need to be able to identify the main idea. I was saying maybe three main points, and then they need to be able to synthesize or connect that piece. And I'll probably add this too. They need to be able to identify terms that they are not aware of. A huge
Hmm.
testing that we see is our kids don't understand the language, right? But even beyond that, kids and people who have a more expansive language are better to communicate, right? So if you are better to able to communicate your condition and your predicament, you're less likely to go to other means to express that. So if I can say it this way, I don't need to lay hands on somebody potentially, or I don't need to be self-destructive to myself. So that's one of the first things I'm gonna do is we're gonna make sure every day, and this really shouldn't, this ain't a Monday through Friday thing. Reading is a way of life. Now, writing could be journaling. Have them reflect on their day. I tell my daughters like when you journaling, I don't even want you to think about school. Like, I don't want you to think about trying to be proper. Just write how you feel. Get it out. Reading.
Hmm.
What's something I did? I signed up for a black newspaper, a physical copy. Nobody reads physical copies no more. We don't need to, right? But they
Hmm.
still this. It ain't even it used to be. We had the Chicago Defender in Chicago. Like that's all digital. I signed up for the Afro newspaper in the Baltimore, D.C. region. We get that paper like once a week. I throw it to my kids. Read something. Tell me what you learned. You know what I'm saying? Like, because then it lets them know too. Process the news you get separate from the opinions of the outside world that social media gives you. So we're reading for information, we're reading to learn, and then we're going to also write and reflect about it. That's one of my main first points.
Gotcha. What I want to add to it is identity, understanding who we are is a major component of, the educational process. And what I want to share is this statistic. It says a survey of students published by the American Psychological Association, APA, in 2023 concluded, or the survey concluded, that students who regularly use visualization techniques to set academic and career goals reported being 30% more likely to follow through on their plans in comparison to those who didn't. So, parents, I want you to think about this. I want you to, you don't necessarily have to put it in the chat, or if you want to put it in the chat or wherever you're watching this, feel free. But this is a contemplative question. What images are your kids entertaining? Are we setting time to do meditation, quiet time, visualization exercises, and affirmations? So I want you to make a note if you're taking notes, or type this out in the chat just to get everybody engaged and involved, because this is a real in-depth conversation. VMA, visualization, meditation, and affirmation, in combination on what Krim shared, the strategy. If we add those components to it, ooh, when that young person transition into school in August or whatever the month they transition based on the state that you live in, as the kids would say, it's gonna be up and stuck. Because once that confidence is built, and I don't know, Krim, you can speak this because I know you done tremendous research in terms of African American boys and self-image and identity. But if we realize how important self-esteem is in the equation when you referring to academics, it's important because a person has to see themselves in the right light in order to receive some of the information and the knowledge that's being shared with them. So if I can see myself in the right light, then I'm going to have more confidence and I'm going to believe that I can do it. In addition, to add to that, positively reinforce the baby steps. A baby step is a step. If Because we get opportunity to work with families where some kids, seventh grade, their reading skills aren't ideally where they should be. So we're gonna work with you where you are. And as you take these baby steps, good job, Ernest.
Yep.
I see you, sir. Keep going. You don't know how to sound out that word. I'm gonna show you how to sound out. We're gonna work through this together. But that means that we have to be sacrificial and be willing to take the time to go through these exercises with our kids to give them the confidence and a positive reinforce the direction that we want them to go.
Man, as you were talking, I started going through my books because this right here is what I'm gonna recommend to folks. Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Juwan Jufu, Developing Positive Self-Images and Discipline in Black Children. This book is only about 90 pages or so. I started reading it the other day. I was actually reading it this morning, so it's timely you said that. Second chapter, Developing Positive Self-Images and Self-Esteem. He said he got something in here that talks about self-esteem is like the self-concept of how we view ourselves. And he says each person tries to be the kind of person that he thinks his environment expects him to be.
Whoa.
Man,
Yeah.
each person tries to be the person that he thinks his environment expects him to be. So when you talk about, again, like you said, that self-esteem, that self-confidence, our kids, and this is a huge proponent of one of my talking points during presentations on culturally relevant pedagogy, is again expectations. What do we expect from our kids? Our kids, will perform to the level we expect them to. They'll
Wow.
kids like classes that demand the best from them, even if they don't truly realize it in that moment. They enjoy that more. They don't want the teacher that's just content with them saying they're just trying to pass. So we also have as parents have to think about that. What does our environment expect from our kids? And if we are in an outside environment, so we know generally how the country views, right? So we ain't concerned with that. We know how the government may have viewed us historically and how they might view us now. We ain't concerned with that. We can't change what they do, right? But if we are in an immediate outside environment that might expect the same thing, right? Then we got to say, and this is one thing I want to give too, because I think you bring up a broader point of setting that environment. We talk about purpose, we talk about the work, we talk about environment. We got to realize that our home and our family is the first government that our kids come in contact with. Our home and our family. So how we govern it ain't just like TV, family, like it ain't just bedroom. It is you implicitly, whether you know it or not, have instilled a bill of rights to your kids, right? The 10
Mm-hmm.
most important amendments is when you wake up, you do this, you make your bed, right? When you wake up or when you get home, you put your stuff up, or you wash your lunch trays, or before you go to bed, you clean the kitchen or you fold your clothes. Our kids implicitly are learning about who they're gonna become based on what we demand from them, right? Or if they
Mm-hmm.
got a phone, checking in when they get to their practice after school, or not texting after a certain hour. That is something that we create. In addition to that, the expectation or what they are expected to be implicitly will also be determined by what we allow them to see of themselves. What I mean
Mm-hmm.
by see of themselves is what they see on television, what they see on their phone. Whenever I start going through old pictures, and I told you I got 4 kids, so this is difficult sometimes. Whenever I go through old pictures, there are some years where some kids weren't there. But what's the first thing they say when I'm going through old pictures? Where am I? Where's me? That's what they say. Where's me? But if it's 2017, two of them, I'm saying one here. But they
Right.
looking for themselves. Hey, where am I at? Right? Our kids do the same thing. When we flipping through TV, it's like they looking, where am I? Now they might be watching shows where ain't no representation, but they still. So if they don't see enough of themselves represented, then they're gonna be trying to change themselves to be like the thing they see the most, because they're gonna think that's the most appropriate thing to be. So
Wow.
they might be in the mirror extra long. I got girls, so like they might be in the mirror extra long. They might be trying to make
Mm-hmm.
their hair look a certain way to fit a certain way. So like you said, that should I think that should even be moved up before my point of the work, because the self concept, they gotta be able to they have to be able to have a believe in themselves and understand that they can truly achieve, and they gonna believe it primarily if you believe it. And if they
Yeah.
got two people that believe it, so if it's two parents, that's that's the compound effect.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not, then we got to have somebody else in their life that needs to be in regular contact. It might be a parent, I mean, it might be a teacher, might be a coach, might be a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
might be a friend of the family.
Attaching identity. Please hear this, y'all. Attaching identity solely to academics is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Attaching identity solely to academics is dangerous because if I get an F or a D, that could mean I'm a bad person,
Yeah, yeah.
or that can mean that I'm quote unquote dumb. Please forgive me. It's so many factors because we've been on the side of the educator, of the teacher. It's so many factors that influence a grade, and we can't go into depth for in this segment. Maybe we'll do a part two one day, but it's a lot of factors that go into that. But we can't afford to solely build confidence in our kids because they get good grades, because that puts them in a very for lack of better words, competitive society where, and this is something that really enhances individualism, is if I'm looking at Ernest's test and he got a better grade than me, I don't see him as an asset. I could see him as competition.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really not my comparison to his grade. My comparison is to the standard that the teacher has set. So if it's meant for me to get an A, then I'm going to strive for that. But if I'm looking at him and saying, what you get? Oh, you got a better grade than me. that immediately turns into comparison. We do want grace to be a component that does build self-esteem, but we do not want it to be the foundation. So I want to give you this piece from the National Library of Medicine, Potential Pathways to Self-Affirmation. One account of why self affirmations are successful is attributed to their ability to broaden a person's overall perspective and reduce the effect of negative emotions. The citation is Sherman 2013, Cohen and Sherman 2014. For example, researchers have suggested that self affirmations remind individuals of psychological or psychosocial resources that extend beyond a specific threat, which allows them to focus on sources of positive self-worth that transcends the threat. This in turn is thought to reduce reactivity to threat and protect overall
Mm. Mm.
psychology, their overall
Man,
psyche. And so what does that mean is that because of my affirmations have identified who I am. So now when I see a perceived threat, I have confidence to face that threat and I can persevere to that threat. What does that look like? Man, this test is rough. Man, you know what? I don't know this one. It's summer break and I'm reading, man. These words are too much for me. You know, I'm gonna close the book. Because subconsciously it's addressing my identity and it's shutting me down. You know what? I'm gonna stop trying. Kids in our society now, because Krim and myself and other parents that may be watching this in their late 30s, mid 40s, we're cut from a different cloth. We took a licking and kept on ticking. Our kids nowadays, they get hit, it hits their self-esteem, they internalize the rejection. You know, I don't want to try anymore. Because everybody gets a trophy for trying, which we set a precedence to where now if I fail, I I identify that as who I am, not as an experience that I can learn from. Krim, can you put that book up for us before you
yeah,
chime in? That
yeah. This is developing positive self images and discipline of Black children. I know it's hard to probably see. Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. He makes very specific books. Like everything that's in the title is what the book is about. Like I
mm-hmm.
reference in my own book, which I'm gonna recommend too. How Black History Can Save Your Life. I'll talk about
Yes,
him in the
sir.
very first chapter. I referenced a book of his called "Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys."
Mm-hmm.
I recommend. Look, really, when I look at some of the talking points I have and you have, if we were to YouTube him, you would see that we rest like on we stand on his shoulders. The stuff
Mm-hmm.
he was talking about then is what we talk about now, just for this generation, and that's what history teaches us. We ain't doing nothing new. We just trying to deliver y'all this information in this time that was also delivered back then. So that's very important and pivotal.
Yeah. I wanna see. No, when I gave the VMA, the visualization, meditation, affirmation, and my first thought is that man, it sounds like that's a lot. It
Mhm.
don't take that much. It don't take that much time. It don't
Yeah.
take that much time. It takes some time, but it doesn't take a lot. When we go into schools and we do our meditation and visualization exercises, it takes probably to go through the whole exercise, maybe 2 to 3 minutes,
Mhm.
maybe 2 to 3 minutes. But to think like this, because you mentioned habits in the early part of the conversation, if a young person and a parent during the summer break, and we take time out, even if I got to go to work and I'm going to drop you off at this summer program, if we take 2 to 3 minutes to go through these visualization and meditation and affirmations
Yeah.
every day in the summer, when I get back to school, I'm going to be different. You know what? When I get back to school, I'm gonna be different because you can start off, and if you all want the resources, you can always reach out. You can specifically email me directly for those resources at Mr. Cage at divineworkset.com. That's Mr. Cage at divineworkset.com. If we go through this exercise on a consistent basis, that child is going to be different. Visualization, uh, normally what we do is we do quiet time first,
Yep.
and then we engage the images that we use to help them, begin to manage and control the thoughts. Because we have the ability, well, I won't say the ability, but in society is always doing, 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 doing.
Yep.
We got to take the time to just be. And when we cultivate the art of just being, then we can manage our thoughts better, which impacts us in life and in the classroom. Because if I can manage the stress, can manage the anxiety, can manage the extra thoughts, then I can hear and comprehend and visualize in my mind what Mr. Krim is sharing with me. But as I go through this exercise with my parent during the summer and we giving affirmations, it's an experience that we sharing that's not only building your child up, but it's building you up simultaneously.
Yeah, to that point too about the affirmations. I mean, it helps your mindset. Literally, it helps you set your mind on like who you are, who you're supposed to be. In our mind, naturally, we're wanderers. Anything that catches our attention, we that's why social media works so well because it takes our attention, and before we can even think of something else, it grabs it again. Because you might be
Mm-hmm.
scrolling, then something pops up, or you get a notification. Every few seconds, they're giving you something to keep you glued in. That's
Yep.
why it's a quote unquote free app because the attention is the currency. Because your attention, your money, like that's the most valuable thing. They're taking away the most valuable thing. So like for me, even before I get on social media in the morning, I gotta feel metaphorically, I gotta fill my tank up before I start driving, before I start traversing those rocky social media streets. I gotta fill up. I gotta read something. I gotta read something spiritual. I gotta read the Bible. I gotta read a self-help book. Or just read a history book, read a devotional, like again, focus on the affirmations so that when I come across something that takes me away from my true essence, it's not that it's bulletproof. It's a reminder. Like, no, 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 that's not who you are. That's not what you're about. It's right here. And that's why even too, what you said about like making our kids realize that they aren't attached to that outcome of grades. I heard a psychologist say that we should be instilling the fact that our kids are hard workers more than they are smart. What that means is if we just tell them they're smart, they get A's their whole life, then they come into that difficult course, then they like, oh, well, maybe I'm not so smart then. Maybe I can't do it. But if you tell them you smart, yeah, but you a hard worker, and that's ultimately what's making you smart. Then they realize they got to put in that work because I was getting good grades right through high school, but I still had to exercise some effort. So when I'm almost flunked out my first semester in college,
Mm-hmm.
then I put the pedal to the metal. I worked my butt off because I knew I was always smart, but I always knew too. I wasn't never the quote unquote smartest in the room, but I knew I
Mm-hmm.
could outwork anybody.
Mm-hmm.
We put that in our kids, man. That's why even with my daughter, when she run, one of my kids when they run track, it's what you do in track for your kids is because it's an individualistic team sport. You only really run together when y'all doing a relay if you do that. So you have to let your kids know that your goal is to beat your other time. That's what don't worry about their time. Now, when they get older, that could be different, but it's like just try to bet your best to beat your time. And I would always tell my daughter when she first started, I say try your best, let God do the rest. Just
Mm-hmm.
put forth effort. Just put like
Mm-hmm.
I tell her, I'm already proud of you. Like I don't care. Like honestly, I really don't care. Like I don't care if you get first or last. You still my baby.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you get a. You know what I'm saying? Not A or F. Now I do care, right? A or F. But I mean, like I don't care. Like in terms of your self worth and your value. Our kids gotta have that in their life too. So it's a high expectation, but it's not some. If you don't get this A, then it's a wrap, and that's too far, right? But we want to
Mm-hmm.
also too. With that said, when I talk about work, I think that we should be I'm a believer in incentivizing. Now I don't necessarily just like pay like that. Not I've done it before, not consistently, but we do offer incentives. So it could be your kids, favorite snack, or it could be their favorite thing to do, or maybe they get an extra hour, whatever, like tablet time or something. But over the summer, it's important for our kids to understand that there is money in intellect. That we ain't just saying get good grades. We're saying that no, this is gonna pay off for you, right? And I'm gonna
Yeah.
show you on a micro scale what that means. When you're talking to your kid, it's like, okay, you do these book reports all week, then we're gonna get this. We're gonna go here. We're gonna go to your favorite ice cream shop, whatever. Or you can work out something where you pay a certain amount. Literally though, That's what my grandmother did for me. In hindsight, I forgot, bro. Like my grandmother, she was doing well for herself later in her life too. So it was like, yo, you get an A, you getting this much. B, this much. Anything else, you ain't getting nothing. So
Mhm.
for me, as someone who didn't start working until my senior year, like I'm banking on that because my like it ain't that I love school. I love being with my friends, but I love the fact that if I worked hard, then I can get something in return. Now, what does that mean? Now, literally, I'm getting paid off of how much I learn. Because the more I read, the more information I can filter through myself and then teach to my community. And then
Right.
also too, our kids have a potential to get scholarships if they it ain't it's more academic scholarships than basketball and football scholarships out there.
Yes,
So
sir.
we can have our kids see that connection. To your point too about images, let's also over the summer, let's highlight people who have done this. Let's highlight people in their favorite thing that also are scholars. They like rap. Okay, J. Cole graduated at the top of his class. You like hooping. Okay. Jalen Brown is dang near a genius. Okay. You know what I'm saying? We showed them that. It's like, bro, Jalen Brown is investing in creating a black economy in Boston. He ain't just
Mhm.
hooping. Jalen Brown is like, I'm hooping for this. J. Cole could stop rapping now and probably be a professor. Lupe Fiasco is literally a professor of hip hop. You know what I'm saying? So I think
Yeah.
that's important too. But let me pause right there in case you got some reflections on that.
No, I'm just, you know how we normally talk. It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
hey, you go hard, I go hard. You know
yeah.
how
Yep,
we do. I know
yep.
we got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
We probably gonna have to do a part two because
What
it's
we
just,
definitely do.
but
Yeah.
I want to really concentrate and give our families across the nation, across the world, some practical strategies in two case scenarios. I want to tackle the single parent family home scenario transition into the summer break. What can we give to that person? What tools, ideas, strategies can we give to that person? Then we can do the two parent household.
Yeah. I mean, so I had an experience for a little while when my mom was single, so I would say like now again as an educator, that's a cheat code. I gotta say, if you have a parent that's a teacher, that's a cheat code because they know how these things work. So we were in summer camps pretty much every year. My mom would work summer school too. So and if we couldn't go to summer camp, we were going to school with her. Which as a teacher, that's easier to do as opposed to many other jobs, right? But if you are able to afford that, I think putting them into some type of summer camp is very beneficial. It's just like a school thing. Like and it's gonna be more fun for the kids. They're gonna be outside. They're gonna take field trips, right? And there's gonna be a certain level of structure. So what happens then if you're still working full time over the summer and they have summer camp from whatever, maybe it could be 8 to 4, 8 to 5, 9 to 5 after school, I mean, at the camp, you are able to engage in these conversations with them. Still have them do something, but it could be more leisurely. It could be maybe it's a magazine, maybe it's not a book. And I think that's important too. Have kids read things they are personally interested in. So
There
I
it
think,
is.
yeah, get them involved in something. There are a variety of programs. I'm doing the school year. I have an online K through 5 Black History course over the summer. We kind of
Mhm.
reduce that to once a month. So like there are other programs though like I mentioned previously when we were speaking, OutSchool has classes kids can sign up for a variety of things that are very affordable. So I think that's important as well. And I would say one of my last points is we have to set aside time, I would say weekly, to take our kids on family trips.
Yes, sir.
It's not like we have to remember with all of this, the reading and writing, that's all important. People learn the best while engaged in activity. Okay.
Hmm.
Nobody learns how to walk by reading a book. Nobody learns, you know what I'm saying, how to read. Like you have to hear people to learn how to talk and verbalize better, especially depending on the type of learner you are. Maybe you're more visual, maybe you're auditory, but we have to get up and move. You ain't gonna learn how to be a great basketball player by just reading the playbook. You got to get up and move. So let's find a way to take our kids to museums, especially if you live in a metropolitan area you in Chicago, New York, DC, Atlanta, LA, Houston, you have plethora of places to go. It ain't, I mean, Black History museums, like, you know what I'm saying, the broader museums that encompass everything, the zoos. We going to, you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying, art museums, bruh. Like, I mean, we're gonna go. Matter of fact, we're gonna go to Chicago. We're gonna go to Chinatown. We're gonna go to Greek town. We're gonna learn from different cultures. And while we in these establishments, we're gonna talk to the people, you know, because like that's the on the job training. You know what I'm saying? I would honestly say more should be invested in the experiences. That's why I said with the reading and writing, you can get that done in 1 or 2 hours. But then for the rest of the day, take your kids to the park, take your kids somewhere fun, have them immersed in these environments where they can learn, have them job shadow if they old enough, you know?
I think what I would add to what you were saying was take them to the library. We
Yep.
just
Yep.
we over we this is my opinion, professional opinion. I believe we overlook the library because remember we talked about the environment in the beginning. We are a product of our environment. Take them to the library. You know, sit and read with them. Especially in Joliet, we got amazing libraries on the east side and the west side of town. The east side library has been renovated. There's other aspects and resources in the library other than books. We got a whole like podcast area, computer area. You can create a lot of digital products downtown in the Joliet Public Library, just as an example. And it's in walking distance and it's free. So even if we're talking about the social economics aspect, as far as well, I can't afford to take my kids here and there. If we do some research, we'll discover that there's libraries in walking distance. And then the other part was that because we've done a mentoring program 2 years in a row, we won't do it this year, but there's enough free programming around. I remember parents specifically in Bolingbrook carpooling. So one parent would have to go to work and they linked up and okay, you live in Bolingbrook, I live in Bolingbrook. This is back to the village. We live in Bolingbrook. Can you take? And they did their own agreement. It wasn't about us connecting. They connected themselves and found out that they live in the same area, which saved time, effort, and gas on getting the kids to the program. But there are enough free summer programs to get your child involved, no matter what age they are. They can be age 9 all the way up to a teen. There's work programs involved too, and these are some of the resources that we have available just through our community partners. So once again, if that's something that people want to get involved in, specifically in the Joliet area, just feel free to reach out to Mr. Krim or myself,
I
and
think
then
that's the
we'll.
point, though. That I ain't forgot about that. I forgot the library, man. I don't think people realize just how much fun that is for kids because
Hmm.
really, kids section, bro, be off the chain. They be
It
having
really
so
do.
many fun programs. It's interactive. And the times I've taken my kids to the library with me when I get work done, I mean, they get lost in it because one of the low key ways to improve literacy is to surround your kids with books. Like,
Hmm.
so there are practical things you do to improve literacy, but there's also this thing of where you become your environment. So if like you're around books all the time, naturally your curiosity goes toward that. Again, it's the idea of if you come in home and the first thing you think about or go towards is the TV is because maybe it's the biggest thing in the house. But if you go towards a bookshelf, like if that's the first thing you see, that's what you become interested in, and that's what you strive to do. So I think that's a tremendous point. And I think just to kind of wrap it up for me in thinking about what all the things that we discussed, we have to be clear on what our kids' purpose is and what school is for. I think to your point too, we have to cultivate the environment. We got to cultivate the mindset for what this summer is going to be like. We got to make sure they're doing the right work, and we got to make sure we exposing them to the right experiences too.
Yeah, powerful, man. One last note, as we close out, I think about my baby sister, and this is an amazing story because it was a baby sister connected to a relationship that I was in because I was dating her sister when I was younger. Even though the relationship it didn't materialize, it still was family. And I used to spend time with my baby sister. Shout out to Kimmy. And then This is a short but amazing story. She was very artsy, in her preteen years. And what we would do is I would go and get her, and we would do a big brother, little sister Saturday, where we would spend the whole Saturday together. If she had to go to the store and get her stuff, snacks, her lady stuff, I would take her, wherever. But she loved Michael's. And I remember taking her to Michael's. It's an arts and crafts store that was once in our area. And I happened to be on the phone with my mom, and I said, Mimi, just go in there and do what you do. This young lady was in there exploring for an hour. I was on the phone with moms for an hour. I hung up, and she was still in there doing her thing. And I gave her room to do her thing because I knew that she had that arts and craft inside of her. She eventually, as she became an adult, she eventually went to school in Wisconsin and studied abroad.
Mm.
She FaceTimed me one day. This was years ago. She FaceTimed me. And no, I FaceTimed her. She had on a bonnet. And US time it was like 5 in the afternoon. I was like, Mimi, why you still got on a bonnet? She said, Cage, I'm in Korea. I said, oh, that is. What time is it there? And she told me the time. And I say that because that's just one instance and one part that I had the honor to play in this young lady's life to cultivate an opportunity. And shout out to her parents as well and anybody else who played a part in her life. But we all played our part in cultivating where this person went and studied abroad. I didn't study abroad. But because of the sacrifice and the relationship and putting her in an environment where she can explore, who knows, how that enhanced and added to her self-esteem, her confidence, and her imagination, where she could live the quality of life that she know that she's supposed to experience.
Powerful.
Any last words, my brother?
No, I mean, I think we already said it. We got to do a part two. I think we need to flesh out some of these points more in depth. I think especially as we get closer to the summer, um, more parents even want to hear about this again. So I would just say stay tuned for part two.
Building bridging summer gaps, a guide for parents to strengthen their child's academic resilience and positive break of positive behavior during the summer break is extremely important. We want to keep this on the radar because what we don't want to do is that allow our kids to go back and make it harder for our teachers.
Yeah,
Because you and I both know we've been in a situation that at the beginning of the school year, you're like, man,
yeah.
what happened? What
Too much with
happened?
no structure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's more time that we can invest in pouring into them and imparting to them if we prepare the ground for our teachers to help them. So this has been our session. We'll talk about doing a part two. If you interested in a part two, whatever platform that you're watching, let us know. Just you can easily type I want to see a part two. And then we'll move forward and identify a date and a time that's convenient for everybody and go into more detail because there's many pieces that we didn't get a chance to touch in concerning the competencies, the four. I know Krim has some stuff he wanted to add to that as well. But we'll make it happen if the demand is there and it's what y'all want, where we can help you all, then we are willing to do it. As we close and sign out, we always want to leave you with this parents, educators, students, community leaders, be great at what you do, but be even greater at who you are. We're going to end this. Give me 1 second. Thank you all for being here with us. I'm trying to, let's see. Thank you much for being with us. We appreciate you.